we're ready for our next and final panel. And again, what a rich, just extraordinary wealth of knowledge and expertise already shared with us today. So with that, I'm ready to welcome our first panelist for the last group. It is Llen Pomeroy. She is the Associate Vice Chancellor for the Office of Institutional Equity and Compliance, OIEC, and Title IX Coordinator at CU Boulder. This is going to be so interesting and so pertinent to what we're going to be facing as a nation, and particularly here in Colorado. In this role, she is responsible for addressing and preventing protected class discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct for the campus. Under Ellen's leadership, OIEC has dedicated staff members in the areas of class resolutions, education, assessment, and support services. Llen has more than 15 years experience at CU Boulder, where she has focused on preventing and investigating allegations of sexual misconduct, discrimination, and harassment. Ellen's previous experience includes a clerkship in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York and the practice of civil rights litigation at a New York City-based law firm. Llen received her undergraduate degree from Brown University and a law degree from New York University School of Law. With that, welcome, Llen, and we're looking forward to hearing your insight and your information for us today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the warm introduction. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Did that come up for everyone okay? I'll take that as a yes. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk a little bit about CU Boulder specifically and what our program looks like in terms of the Office for Institutional Equity and Compliance. Sorry. It is not letting me advance the slide.
Try putting your cursor in the black area next to the slide.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so today's agenda will be, thank you very much. I think we're working. That's great. We'll talk about an overview of the policies and the role of institutional equity and compliance. I want to talk specifically about student cases, so cases against student respondents that we see within the office. Our educational efforts and some of our sexual assault prevalence data on students, because we are fortunate to have within our educational team an assessment unit that is embedded, and we learn a lot, not just from things that are reported to OIEC for case resolution, but also things that our undergraduate students report on our tailored surveys that we do every 3 to 4 years. So just by way of background, and some of that was covered in the introduction, but we have an office on campus that is structured to enforce 4 university policies for students, faculty, and staff. And many campuses are structured this way, though there is some diversity in the way campuses structure their offices. We feel it's important to include case resolutions, so that's investigations and informal resolutions, along with assessment, education, and support and safety measures, all under one office. And we do that for students, faculty, and staff. And so our investigators will address cases under our protected class non-discrimination policy, as well as our sexual misconduct, intimate partner violence, and stalking policy, conflicts of interest in cases of amorous relationships, which can sometimes blur the line when it comes to allegations of sex harassment, particularly between our students and our faculty, and our lactation space policy. I'm really going to focus today most specifically on our sexual misconduct, intimate partner violence, and stalking policy. And I wanted this group to be aware of the provisions of sexual misconduct that policy covers. So that includes hostile environment and quid pro quo sexual harassment, dating and domestic violence, which we refer to as intimate partner violence on the campus, sexual assault, which can be non-consensual sexual intercourse or contact, sexual exploitation, and stalking. So just to give you a little bit of information about case trends, because we often get questions about this. This gives a breakdown for the past 3 years, so starting in 2021-22 through the current or through the last fiscal year, 23-24. And it breaks down cases against students in particular in terms of sexual misconduct, discrimination and harassment, and then the things that get reported sometimes outside of OIEC policy, things that we need to refer to student conduct or to human resources for other forms of grievance or adjudication procedures. I'm going to focus on the next slide on the sexual misconduct piece, but one thing that's really interesting that we've just noted is that we've seen a pretty dramatic increase this past year in the protected class related category. Most of those have been additional complaints that we've received based on religion and national origin. And obviously with the Israel-Gaza conflict, that has resulted in a ton of Title VI related concerns for my office. We have not seen a tremendous spike in gender-based allegations under our discrimination and harassment policy, but I just wanted to provide some context for that increase over the past year. If we focus on sexual misconduct, these are the same numbers you saw on the last slide, just broken down more specifically. We actually did see a pretty big spike in 21-22, and that was just as our students were returning back post-COVID. We sort of speculate that there was a sudden freedom to socialize and students were back on campus after having been not on campus or having been very restricted on campus previously. And so we saw a spike there. But other than that spike in 2021-22, those numbers are relatively consistent, and that goes back further than pre-COVID as well. So people often want to know what we're seeing in terms of the most common allegations under our sexual misconduct policy. And I've broken them down here. In 23-24, you will see that hostile environment, so allegations of verbal remarks that are so severe and pervasive that could create a hostile environment, that is the top category of allegations of sexual misconduct that we saw, followed by dating and domestic violence, sexual assault in two distinct categories, stalking and sexual exploitation. Support and safety measures. I wanted to highlight this, and I mentioned in the introduction that our office covers not just investigations, case resolutions, but also education, assessment, and support and safety measures. When our office was formed back in 2014, we made a bunch of changes on the campus in terms of consolidating all those functions under one roof. And the development of a support and safety measures team was critical, because what we often see is that students will come forward with a claim of sexual misconduct, and they are very unsure about what they want to see happen next. They don't really know at the outset whether they want to see an investigative process through the school. They don't know if they want to report to law enforcement. But often what we do hear is what they know they do want is that they do not want to see their assailant, in the cafeteria. They do not want to have to go to class and then run into this person. They want immediate things to impact their safety and their sense of comfort on the campus. And so developing a specific support and safety measures team that works with complainants to effectuate those measures first and foremost, regardless of whether there's an investigative outcome, whether there's an informal resolution, or whether there is a report to law enforcement, has been really critical. And so I've broken down here on this slide some of what that looks like in terms of the types of support and safety measures that we are providing to students. There are some safety measures, we refer to as safety measures, where we are taking punitive action against a respondent. So things like campus exclusions from all of campus or from specific residence halls or specific areas of campus, interim suspensions where folks are not able to take classes while something is being investigated, residence hall exclusions as well. Those are typically happening where a complainant is moving forward with a formal investigation. And as a matter of due process, we feel that we either must move forward as a matter of campus safety and or a complainant wants us to do so. And with that, we are putting in those safety measures in conjunction with law enforcement as part of the investigative process. But again, even if someone is not participating in an investigative process, or even if we are not moving forward with an investigative process as a campus for various reasons, there's lots of things that we can do to offer support for a complainant who may have been the victim of sexual violence. So education and prevention, one of the things that we are most proud of as a campus is our required education for all incoming undergraduates. And we also require our returning second years, as well as graduate and professional students to complete online education. And they must take a test and receive a appropriate score in order to register for classes. So you cannot actually become an undergraduate on the CU Boulder campus and enroll for classes unless you have taken that educational program before enrolling in those classes. We decided to, so it was after our after our last survey effort, so back in 2021, we always had the required education for incoming first-year students. And I'm going to talk in a little bit about some of our prevalence data, some of the things that come from our own surveys. Seeing a spike for our returning second-year students in the beginning of the fall semester prompted us to do a second-level mandatory training for our returning second years for that reason. And that's based on some of the data that we were seeing out of our own instruments. In addition, we offer skill building sessions. We talk about effective bystander intervention, consent in relationships, and we had 4,375 students participate in those programs during the past year. And then we do a lot of outreach events. I know there was a question raised on the last panel about, how do you get the word out? And it's really important. We see ourselves as part of the campus wholly. And it's one thing to require mandatory training and to offer skill building sessions, but we need to get the message out about the support that exists for students, for faculty, for staff, how to report something, and of course, what we require in terms of consent education for our students before they enroll. And so we have a ton of marketing materials and we do a ton of events with students each year with that in mind. I'm just gonna... So we have a program in place where we do our own sexual assault, sexual misconduct surveys. We had one in 2015, we had one in 2021, and that was delayed because of COVID. And we just this fall did that instrument again with our undergraduate students in 2024, and we're currently analyzing those 2024 results right now. The survey is very detailed. It asks about assaultive behaviors and tactics, the timing. So when did it occur? That's how we know. You hear a lot about the red zone and the first couple of weeks of college being a tremendous increase in terms of prevalence. And we saw that on our campus, as well as, again, that spike during for returning second-year students. We ask about gender and connection to the offenders. So is this someone that they knew before or knew in some way, or was this person a total stranger to them? The location of offenses, is it happening on campus? Is it happening off campus? If it's happening on campus, is it in the residence halls? Is it somewhere else on campus? Disclosing, so what was their experience like if they did disclose a sexual assault? Did they disclose to the police? Did they disclose to our Office of Victims Assistance, which is confidential advocacy on campus? Did they disclose to our office for purposes of investigation and follow up from a university system standpoint? What were the consequences to them? We talked about in previous panels, mental health consequences, physical health consequences. We ask what those consequences look like for individuals. Social factors. How did the sexual assault affect their sense of belonging, their mattering, their friendships on campus? We look at demographics and background characteristics, and we want to know, overarchingly so, how the assault may have affected our ability as an institution to retain students, because we do know that students who are subject to sexual assault or sexual misconduct, in addition to seeing, and our survey data shows this, tremendous impact in terms of a feeling of belonging and mattering and making friends, mental health, physical health. We also know that it's really hard for us to retain students who have experienced that on campus, and that is a tremendous focus for us. So this just gets into some of the specifics about our data. The participation has fallen since 2015, but our response rate for undergraduate women is quite high still, between 40 and 60%. And that's really important because that's the population where we do see the highest prevalence. Across administrations, the survey samples have been very representative of our student population. So we have really, really good data to use here. And in terms of gender diversity, again, it's listed here that approximately 9% of participants identify as gender diverse, 25% identify as LGBTQ+. So our 2021 survey results, which again, we did the survey in 2024 as well, but we're still analyzing those results right now. We should have more information this spring semester. But our 2021 survey results showed that our sexual assault rates for undergraduate women fell during COVID compared to 2015. So in 2015, when we did the survey, 28% of undergraduate women reported that they were subject to some form of sexual misconduct on the CU Boulder campus, or during the time that they were a CU Boulder student, I should say, because our policies go broader than just covering the four walls of the campus. We also address as an investigative matter, and we're also interested in the experience of our students, whether it happened on campus or off campus. And that rate fell from 28% in 2021 to 15% in 2015. And there's a lot of things that we learned from our 2021 data and a lot of programs that we implemented to try to reduce prevalence, but we're also recognizing that because of COVID, it is possible that some of that decrease was due to what we were calling a pandemic pause. Again, if students aren't on campus and socializing in the same way, they may not be reporting the same degree of prevalence. Here is a really interesting point that we learned from our survey data. Among CU undergraduate women, here is where the assault rates were the highest. It was for those who have difficulty paying for basic necessities, those who identify as bisexual or pansexual, those who have a prior history of unwanted sexual contact, and those who are members of a sorority. So those are our, of all of the demographics that we looked at, those were the areas where we saw the highest prevalence reported. And again, the timing, we learned a lot about timing from our instruments. For incoming students, rather than, I know the red zone data nationwide talks about really the first 4 weeks. For us, we see classes typically start mid-August. We see September, October as the highest window, is the window of highest risk. And again, we saw that same kind of trend, again, September, October for our returning second year students. And that's how we changed some of our educational programming because of that. For first year students who begin in January, again, that first spring semester is a window of high risk. Spring break is another high risk for us. And again, incoming undergraduate women who are sexually assaulted during the fall are significantly less likely to return for their sophomore year. So we know that this is having a tremendous impact on retention. Oops, sorry, went too far. How you can help. This is really quick, but I just want to put a plug for by the time students get to us. by the time they arrive on the CU Boulder campus or any college campus. It is too late for us to provide comprehensive education. We can provide information about bystander intervention. We can educate on consent. We can, of course, investigate and respond effectively when someone comes forward with a report. But we're talking about really preventing this on college campuses and not just CU Boulder. We really need to look at what we're offering in middle and high school. Students are already coming to us with relationship patterns in terms of domestic violence, intimate partner abuse, stalking that are quite unhealthy. We're seeing that spike in the red zone, if you will, in September, October. That's a very hard time for us to try to get all of this information to students and make a difference. They need to learn about comprehensive sexual health and relationships, healthy relationships, starting in middle school and high school. And if we can't do that, we're not going to be able to substantially reduce the incidence of sexual misconduct for our young adult population. So of all of the things that I think AAUW and others can help us with, it's really looking at resources and funding for this at an earlier age so that we can really solve the problem or make a difference in the problem at the college level. I know we are running short on time, so I'm talking very quick. I'll just say thank you, and here is my contact information. And I look forward to answering some questions from the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. What a rich experience or wealth of experience and expertise that you've shared with us. And again, I think all of us are on board with the sooner and more preventative we can be of providing quality information for our students and our children, and that it's never too early to start on that. So I thank you very much for that suggestion, and hopefully we can pass that on as well. So thank you so much, and stay tuned because I know there'll be some questions for you as well. Our second panel member is Roshan Kalantar. She is the Executive Director of Violence Free Colorado, formerly the Colorado Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Roshan previously served as the Associate Director of the Coalition and had been working in the field of advocacy and gender-based violence for over 15 years. Born in Iran, Roshan grew up in Colorado and Arizona. She has lived and worked in Washington, D.C., Boston, and New Orleans, leading advocacy and education programs. Since returning to Denver, Roshan has served as Shelter Program Director at SPAN, S-P-A-N, the Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence, and as a counselor in community and medical settings. She has also taught in education and counseling programs at Metro State University, University of Denver, and Olive School of Theology. All of this work has been grounded in her training in feminist, womanist, post-colonial, queer, and critical race theories. Welcome, Roshan. We look forward to hearing your presentation. And again, I just want to remind people, if you have questions, enter them in the Q&A, and we will address those after our third panelist. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Okay. All right, is that working for folks?
Yes.
Thank you so much. All right. I know that we are running a little behind, and so I'll try to be as quick as I can, and then make space for questions. And so thanks for the introduction. Thanks so much for having us here. We a lot of the work that we do is in collaboration with partners that you've already heard from. So it's another opportunity for me to sort of move a little bit quickly and make space for our last speaker and then questions. But just as a quick reminder for folks, we are Violence Free Colorado. Again, we used to be known as the Colorado Coalition Against Domestic Violence, so you may know us that way. And what that means is, like CCASA, we are the federally recognized anti-domestic violence coalition for the state of Colorado. So what Elizabeth and CCASA do for sexual assault survivors, we work to do for domestic violence survivors. We are a membership organization, so we support about 50 anti-domestic violence programs across the state, and then about another 45 to 50 community partners like the American Association of University Women, who we know may not have a primary goal of supporting domestic violence, but who share a purpose or vision around anti-violence work, equity work, and we know that survivors are in lots of places, so it's really important to us to be in community supporting folks who are supporting survivors across the state. We have two primary functions. One is training and technical assistance. So if there's anything that we can do for you at any time, please reach out. We're happy to answer questions or offer trainings or connect you with folks locally who can do that. And then our second arm is public policy and systems change. And so this is the work you've probably heard the most about so far. We do a variety of public policy work through legislation and legislative change, but we also do a lot of systems work at the state and local levels, sitting on a variety of task forces and advisory boards, things like that, where we are representing survivors and advocates in conversations about a variety of systems pieces, everything from how child support works to how mandatory reporting might work to judicial training. You know, these are just a few of the places that we've been in the last few years. So we are so these are the two big pieces of our work. I think we've talked a lot about domestic violence today. I know it's a word that gets used a lot. Sometimes it's helpful to ground ourselves in a definition. I think the most important piece here is that it's a pattern of controlling behavior. And I think the other thing that feels very important right now is recognizing that folks who use abusive behaviors use them in a variety of ways. So we often think of domestic violence as primarily physical violence, but we know that abusers will use anything and everything at their disposal, including systems like legal systems, medical systems, that they will use financial means and other kinds of emotional, sexual, religious abuse to control and intimidate a partner. And then I was asked to talk about domestic violence and workplace violence. And so I wanted to just share a little bit about kind of just some different ways we might think about domestic violence. So I think the way that it's often thought about is as an interpersonal issue. This is how most of the programs that we support address domestic violence, is by intervening directly with the survivor to try to interrupt the pattern of abuse that's happening in their life, and then to try to work on the short and long-term impacts that abuse has on the survivor and their family. One of the things I like to make sure people hear whenever I speak is emergency shelter. So leaving a relationship and going into shelter is often the thing that people think of first when they think of a domestic violence program. This is a critical part of our work, but I want to name that it's not the only part of our work. So whether you are working with someone who doesn't necessarily want to leave a partner, isn't ready yet to leave or isn't sure, or has the means to go but doesn't need emergency shelter, our programs offer a variety of services: legal support, counseling. Short and long-term housing options are available in many programs, financial assistance. And so this can cover anything from rental assistance down to a new pair of shoes to go to work. And especially since COVID, many of our programs have expanded into basic needs support. So diapers, food banks, things like that. So there's a lot of opportunity to get support from a DV program, whether sheltering is an issue or not. So just naming that. And again, this has been spoken about in terms of sexual violence, and I think the data shows that some pretty similar things around domestic violence. So we do another and probably better way to think of domestic violence if we're trying to actually interrupt or stop domestic violence is to think of it as a public health issue. We have lots of good data that, again, has been shared in more detail around sexual violence. The data looks similar for domestic violence, that folks who experience domestic violence and children who witness domestic violence have a variety of acute and chronic health issues. So those are everything from trauma and the way that it can interrupt daily life, depression, anxiety. Brain injury is a primary issue. This often goes unseen. And so over time, particularly multiple brain injuries can impact a variety of things: behavior, decision-making, long-term health. So this is a place we spend a lot of time trying to both educate and intervene. Things like autoimmune disorders and other physical health issues that are a product both of the trauma that survivors experience over the long term and the physical abuse that some survivors experience. It is easy to think that domestic violence happens in the home or in private and doesn't show up in other spaces. I think all of you who work with people know that that's not true, that you are regularly working with survivors, and I'm sure you have been impacted in your classrooms and in your workplaces by the desire to support a survivor or seeing what's happening for a survivor in the way that they're trying to interact with their school or work. There's a lot of data here. I think the most important thing, depending on what studies you look at, the numbers can change a little, but in general, what we know is that the majority of survivors identify being harassed in their workplace or at school, whether that means that the abuser is actually in that site with them, so going to school, for example, with the abuser, or the abuser engaging that, coming onto campus, coming into the workplace. And again, we know this is not an accident. Abusers want to isolate and control behavior, and limiting access to the resources that survivors have access to in school and work is very important. So stopping access to community, to medical care, to essentially the options for people to have connection with something outside the abuse. And school and work are often the primary places that people have that access, and so it is not unusual for abusers to seek to limit that access. We know that most survivors report having missed days of work and school, that it has impacted their performance. There's also studies showing that folks, supervisors and managers can identify the impact, that they say, that they have worked with folks who they can see the impact of job performance of domestic violence. The majority of survivors indicate that they have either lost jobs or had to change jobs. This is something that we often see with survivors, is they have complicated resumes, complicated educational histories, because they've been in and out of work to try to manage the competing needs of staying alive, of staying connected, and also of the consequences of that that show up in the workplace. In schools, we see a variety of behavioral issues. So sometimes the first thing that you'll notice is a student acting out, and so sometimes that's how that energy gets addressed, as folks acting out, and then as you work more closely with that student, you recognize that what's really going on is the abuse that they're experiencing. So all of this is to say that there's a public health and an economic issue right here. There's estimates as high as $8 billion is how much domestic violence costs workplaces in the United States. And where we sit working with domestic violence programs across the state, what I can say is the primary request that we get from survivors and that we hear programs get from survivors is housing and financial support. And when they're asking for financial support, it is often in connection to housing. So if we can make it so that survivors have access to stable housing throughout the process of moving away from of gaining independence from an abuser, and access to the kind of financial support that will get them over that's the primary thing that keeps people, that gives people the choice to leave when and how they want to. Another aspect of the kind of public health response to domestic, or impact of domestic violence, is around mass violence. So again, there's a lot of data that shows a variety of specific numbers, but overall, when you look at the data, the majority of workplace violence it is often the case that it is somehow connected to domestic violence. So it is a domestic violence incident in the workplace. There's also estimates as high as 50% of mass shootings are actually DV homicide. So a person coming into a public space and using firearms or other means to harm as their partner and family. And then there's also a high percentage of people who commit mass violence have a history of domestic violence. So have really good evidence that if we were to take domestic violence more seriously and intervene earlier, we are likely to see less of that kind of public violence as well. So a couple pieces here around what does all this mean for us and our work at Violence Free Colorado. So as I've already mentioned, the top technical assistance requests we get are around housing and legal support. So this is a place that we do a lot of work, and that translates then, and we recognize that those requests are coming because the primary need that survivors have are access to work, financial resources, and housing so that they have a stable way to leave an abuser. Many survivors have to make choices like, do I live on the street, or do I stay with my abuser? Do I take my kids onto the street, or do I stay with an abuser? And those are options no survivor should ever have to make. And so, or there's no choice a survivor should ever have to make. So we've worked in a lot of realms to try to intervene here, one of which has been some policy work. So we have a variety, I mean, there's lots of a long history around our policy work is extensive, and there's lots to share here, but I think I lifted up a few in recent years that I wanted to share. One is an update that we did in early 2024 to protection orders. This expanded definitions, it updated definitions, and it lowered barriers for accessing protection orders. So this is a place we spent quite a lot of time. We worked closely with CICASA and other partners on this. In 2019, we worked with other partners on the Extreme Risk Protection Order bill that has been referenced a few times. It was updated in 2023. And one of the reasons that I wanted to bring it here today is that the new updates include educators. So this is high school through university level. These are you as an educator have the ability to request an extreme risk protection order. And so I wanted to make sure folks know that change, and if there's ways that we can help you learn about what to do, what that means, we are happy to participate in any kind of training or education that you might need around that. In 2021 and 2022, the family leave was introduced here in Colorado, and it became available in January of 2024. And this is again shifting some of the responsibility for paid medical leave from individual employers to the state to ensure that that employees across the state have access when they need it. And the other piece of this that we were very proud of is that you can access family leave to engage resources or support. The immediate response to domestic violence is one of the reasons that you can access family. So we want to make sure that folks know that. So again, that sort of financial bridge that people need to get out and to get independent and safe is another opportunity to have to bridge that. So, and then some of the bills that have already been spoken about, we work closely with Rep. Froelich and with Majority Leader Duran. We are very grateful for their fearless, tireless leadership in this area. So we were part of the funding changes in 2022 around VOCA funding that were already described, and then we were a part of the Prop KK process as well. This year, our primary legislative work will be around the bill that Monica Duran spoke about at the start, which is called the Protections for Victims of Economic Abuse. This bill, as she said, has not been introduced yet. It's coming up shortly, and I can answer any further questions. I think Majority Leader Duran did a great job of describing it, but I'm happy to say more about it if folks have questions. But we are very excited to bring this bill. It's been 3 years in the making, so we're very excited. And I said I'd go fast and I went too long, so I'm sorry. So I will stop there, and I will share, the last thing I'll share is that our public policy director, Soledad Diaz, is usually here. It's her birthday. So when you run into her, say happy birthday. But you're welcome to reach out to me at any time or to Soledad with questions and follow up. And we are very happy to be connected.
Thank you so much, Roshan. What again, a wealth of information. And you were on high speed and going as fast and as furiously with very critical information. And so we are really appreciative of not only what you shared with us today, but what you do every day. Now I'm going to introduce our final panelist for this group. And Debi Hunter Holen, who again is a friend, a personal friend, as well as an expert of service in the city of Aurora. She has developed and devoted herself as a #1 volunteer, but with so much professional background. So let me share a little bit of her bio. She has devoted both her professional and personal life to helping others. Her service includes a wide variety of elected and appointed politicians and positions within government and education. She is a former Aurora City Council member and Aurora PTA Council President. During her 18-year tenure on the staff of Aurora Public Schools, she helped pass 5 bond and mill levy issues, which is a phenomenal accomplishment. So thank you, Debi, for that. Currently, Debi is the executive director of CS Para, Colorado School and Public Employees Retirement Association. She continues to volunteer as the chair of the Aurora Sister Cities International Advisory Committee. And today, Debi will share with us how her own personal experience led to her work as chair of the Colorado Victims for Justice and how she is using that experience as a board member of the Highline Canal Conservancy. Her belief that walking in gratitude, sanctity returns is witnessed daily as she walks solo along trails in the greater metro area. Welcome, Debi, and your courage, your strength, and your experience is going to be very, very helpful for all of us to hear from. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Nancy, and thank you to AAUW. You guys do amazing work, and you're very inspiring, and you know, maybe one day I'll get there. We'll see what happens as I progress. And I want to preface this by saying that while I believe what happened to me was very random, I was talking with someone, thank you, Sue, who pointed out to me that while it was random, I was vulnerable. And that's the key. And I'll get to part of that in my story. And I'm going to also say that I'm starting this story as a story because to me, even though it's been 4.5 years, it still feels surreal at times. So that being said, here I go. Once upon a time on Saturday, July 11, 2020, my life changed forever. I woke up, I got dressed, I went out the door, I met my friend Carly for a walk, and we did that every morning at 6 o'clock because in the middle of July, it's freaking hot if you wait until 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock to get going. So we took off and we met on 2nd and Oswego where we always meet, and we took off, and then bang, make you stop, it hurts. A brief flash of me witnessing me in an ambulance. A voice, later on I found out it was my brother. Damn, she looks like shit. My father saying, she's awake. Ish, little brothers. Sometimes those guys. Being wheeled down a wheelchair in a hospital room. Not a wheelchair. I'm being wheeled down the corridor in a bed. down a hospital room, into a hospital room. And the numerous phone calls my husband entertained, I began to piece together what happened. The court process filled in the blanks for me, but not until the trial on November 14, 2022. So mind you, this happened July of 2020. The court system, the actual trial didn't start until November of 2022. While I know that my scapula was broken and my left finger was shattered open, and I had multiple staples in my head, during the trial, I learned that I had a brain bleed, a punctured lung, and other things. On January 18th, 2023, my assailant, Mr. Gonzalez, was sentenced to count 1 was assault with a deadly weapon, and he received 20 years for that. Count 2 was assault 2 causing injury with a deadly weapon, and he was sentenced to 5 years for that. And then count 4 was felony menacing with a real / simulated weapon. So while I believe what happened was not because I am a woman, it did happen because I was vulnerable. Through time, I found out that Mr. Gonzalez attacked 2 dogs being walked by a neighbor who lives right around the corner from here. And he whacked 2 kids that were riding their bicycles in front of their mother along the canal. And he inappropriately touched another friend on the same day of my attack. And I have to say that probably, maybe a week before that attack, he disrobed and changed clothes, not quite in front of my friend over by the city building, but he was behind a bush, and she later came back. She had called the police on him. And later I found out that when she called me, she told me that was the same guy. Throughout my healing process, including the court process, I learned some things about me. I'm resilient, and when down, I can find good in other people. Forgiveness leads to self-healing. I remain compassionate. While I wasn't a victim, I was victimized. While I was victimized, I'm not a victim. And walking in gratitude, sanctity returns. When I was ready, I recognized, I regained the canal. I first walked with, at that time, the police chief, along with a couple friends, and Carly, my walking partner. So we kind of overtook the canal. And then the police chief walked with me again. The third time, I walked by myself. And I conquered the canal, and I continue to walk by myself. I have to say that I didn't return to a normal state, but I turned to my new normal. So the things that I do now are more proactive, and I'm more alert. Okay. I became active in the Colorado Victims for Justice, and that started because shortly after the January sentencing, I received a court summons to go in to be a judge. and I mean, to be not a judge, to be on the jury. And that was very traumatizing. So I started my process for victims and justice when I received that, and I said, you know, that's not right. People who have been traumatized should not have to go immediately back into the building where they were re-traumatized. So that's how I got involved in that. And I currently serve on the Highline Canal Conservancy, and we're making improvements along the canal. And one of the improvements is looking at some safety precautions that we can take and people can use. And we are making aesthetic improvements as well that will lead to more people wanting to come out to the canal. I keep moving forward one step at a time. And as I said, I'm not back to normal. I've adopted a new normal. A damaged finger changes the way I prepare meals. A broken scapula changes my sleeping positions. And I still am looking for that good hairstylist that won't freak me out when they touch my head. What I know is that the help and the community, that through the help that I received through going to therapy and the medical professionals and the community had played a long and large part in my healing. And I am forever grateful to each of you for all the support that you guys have shown me and given me throughout this. And I still feel like I'm in the healing process, right? It was hard to talk about without getting choked up. And I have to say that how you each show up is paramount to anyone who is healing. So I want you to continue your work in supporting bills that are affecting the lives of both victims and offenders. Mental health is critical. So I have to believe part of Mr. Gonzalez's problem was or continues to be, I think, is that he was victimized as a child when he was in Guatemala and witnessed his older brother being murdered by the cartel. He fled with his family here, and then in 8th grade, I processed his expulsion paperwork because he was being expelled from South Middle School for his behavior toward students. He was pretty violent at that time. And 8th and 9th grade is about the time when schizophrenia starts showing. And if you don't get it treated right away, it continues to fester and get worse. And he's living proof of what can happen if you don't take care of that. So he continued to create victims, and he kept being punished, but he was never treated until he was taken to, and he still wasn't treated, but he was taken to Urban Peak after his mother kicked him out of the home because she couldn't handle him again. Then they migrated here. Mom was not given resources and never did learn how to speak English. And so her experiences and her ability to treat her son or to help him was not limited. It was very limited, and she became overwhelmed and he left the home. And that's when living on the streets kind of did them in. So passing bills that are helpful for students and for offenders and for victims is critical, especially around mental health. Please continue to show up and to hold hands and to listen. And in my case, walk and walk with me. And I just want to say thank you. And always remember that sometimes brothers stink. They say weird things. And walking in gratitude, sanctity returns. And the bills that were already talked about, I think are those are some important things that you can continue to help support. And what I'd like to see is that there is a bill that is being sponsored by, I have to find this, Representative Brown and Senator Frizzell. They're both Republicans, and they are wanting to make a change to jury duty. It's House Bill 251065. What I'd like to see is some amendments to that to include victims of the court system, that kind of thing, to help limit those people from showing up to. This is more on when they say certain people, they're talking more about oh, come on, Debbie. I'm drawing a blank. Veterans, there we go. It's more veteran focused, not just anyone who's been involved in the court system. So that's one thing that I want to change. And then there is a mental health bill that is sponsored by Jesse Danielson, child sexual abuse accountability amendment. That is important. That's not the mental health one, but the mental health one is the competency in criminal justice system services and bail. So thank you. It's kind of a weird story, but anyway, thanks for listening, and thanks for all you do to help make people's lives better. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie, and thank you for your passion and your transparency of sharing your life experience and how it changed you, and now you are continuing to use it to help change others. So with that, Darcy, we'll go to questions, and I know we're running behind, but if there are other questions that you have, please put them in the Q&A. Debbie, did you want to say something?
I do want to say something, and I throw all my thanking. I forgot to thank my husband. He was very critical in the beginning and continues to be in my support of going forward. So, Bill, thank you.
The Bill and Debbie show are equal support for one another. So absolutely. So Darcy, to you.
Debbie, we were all strongly affected by your empathy for your attackers and his traumatic childhood. And we will certainly do our best to help support those bills that you think are necessary. Roshan, I have a question for you. This is from Jane Miller. Can you address briefly, please, the domestic and workplace violence as it pertains to undocumented women in Colorado?
So, yeah, I think the shortest answer is there are different kinds of advocates. So the majority of the programs that are our member programs are community-based programs, and so there are no restrictions at all as to who can be supported or who can be served by those programs. So documentation status, there's never a fee for service. Language access is a piece of the work. So, I'm not sure if that's exactly the question that's being asked, but in terms of like what is the support out there? What can folks do? Reaching out to, you can reach out to us directly. I put some information in the chat about our website, which has a Get Help page on it. So you can see the programs in your local community. But folks have access. I will say during the first Trump administration, we saw a decrease in the number of undocumented folks who sought services, not because our services were unavailable, but because of the fear people have. So I think helping people understand that we don't report to police, we're not connected to police, there's no requirement to report, and that we have a higher level of confidentiality even in HIPAA. So what is brought to us will stay with us. I think those are pieces that it's really important to share out. So I think just helping folks in that way is probably the best.
Thank you. Ellen, this is for you, and I'm going to combine two questions. Linda Davies asks, do other colleges have similar comprehensive protection and reporting programs like CU has? And Carol Tobiasen asks, how much is the CU program in jeopardy from the federal grant freeze?
Okay, two big questions. First of all, Title IX still applies to all universities. And so it provides what I would like to consider as the floor. So across the country, you will see a variety of different structures, resourcing support from college administrations for programs like ours. We are extremely fortunate on the CU Boulder campus to have a robust staff and tremendous support from our campus administration in order to have resources in terms of investigations, in terms of education, in terms of support and safety measures. And I'll say that's just within my office. We also partner, very closely with our Office of Victims Assistance and other confidential support and advocacy resources on campus. Again, we're very fortunate to have that on the Boulder campus, and I'd be lying to suggest that all college campuses across the country are similarly situated in that way. That being said, there are some basic floor requirements that schools must investigate cases under Title IX. There must be some level of education, and there must be some level of support and safety measures per the 2020 Title IX regulations. So again, it is a variety. It is not consistent across the country, but there is a basic floor that we all have. In terms of the second question, I've been doing this work on the Boulder campus since 2005, and we've seen now several different administrations. We've seen various levels of federal funding and support and not, various levels of state funding and support and not. And what we have done, I think, is try to build an office and a set of policies that are as politically insulated and buffered as possible. That is to say, there is support for our office and our policies, regardless of what the funding situation is externally and what the funding situation is, and what the political situation is externally. A good example of this, and it's not specifically a funding question, but in 2020, when the Title IX regulations passed, there were many things in there that schools were not required to do. Schools are not required under the 2020 regulations to investigate cases happening off campus or outside the United States. They are not required to investigate sexual exploitation. That's not included under Title IX. But college campuses can still make a decision to put its own money where it wants to support its students, its faculty, and its staff. And at CU Boulder, we're fortunate that we have done that, and I don't expect any changes to our programs, regardless of federal funding or political support. So that is the best way I can answer that question.
Thank you very much. And there are several other questions in the Q&A that we don't have time to get to, but I think all of you panelists have put your contact information in the chat. If you haven't, would you do that, if you don't mind? And people can address you directly by looking at your address in the chat.